During high school, I was okay. I did okay. I passed. Moved from grade to grade, and when I got up to 12th grade, the United States Marine Corps physical fitness team came to St. Petersburg High School and wanted to form a organization of Marines that would go compete against other high schools. And they were all from Parris Island. I was all for that, and I went out and I tried to pass all the physical things they wanted me to do, and I did. I passed. I was one of 5. I ranked number 3. And we would go from high school to high school and challenge them. That again gave me stamina to be a Marine, and I was in good shape. That gave me the basis to want to be a Marine for sure. During the Vietnam War, which was from 1959 to 1975, I came in about, 1966. It was in full draft. They were drafting you. If you could fog up a mirror, you were in. Of course, I was extremely in, but I went down to the recruiter station without my parents knowing about it. I just went down there and I joined up. If I didn't join, I would be drafted into a branch of the military that I did not want to be in. Nothing against the other branches, especially the Navy. I wanted to be a Marine. Being that I enlisted, I could pick the tour of duty that I wanted. 2-year, 4-year, 8-year, on and on. So I chose 2 because, all right, test the waters, let's see what it's all about. And I knew what boot camp was all about, and I bought that T-shirt. I signed my life away. We boarded a bus and headed to Jacksonville, Florida. That's where you kind of went through a physical. Even though I was accepted by paper, I still had to pass the physical part of it. And you had your heart checked out, and all your eyes and your feet. If there's anything wrong with your feet at all, you were out. And after all that, we boarded a Greyhound bus and headed toward Parris Island, South Carolina. So here I was on a Greyhound bound for Parris Island, and I was in the very back of the bus, and over to my right was Clyde. Clyde was a long-haired hippie, and I told Clyde, I said, you're going to lose all that hair, don't you, Clyde? And he said, no, I got a letter from my clergyman. I got a letter from my congressman right here in my top pocket. They'll cut some off, I know that, but they're not going to cut all my hair off. And I said, Clyde, they're going to cut it all off. No, they're not. Okay, so here we are. It seemed to be a ritual to wind up in Parris Island at 2 o'clock in the morning. We came through the gates, and the sentry at the gate, of course, would wave us in, and he'd give us that look. Oh, what a bunch of idiots. And about a 45-minute trip into the heart of Parris Island, it was all sawgrass, water. There was one road in, one road out. You're not going to escape Parris Island. So as we went in, we pulled in front of a barracks, dark. No lights on, dark. Everybody in the bus was just talking, jabbering. Look at that, look at that, look at that. Outside the bus, you could see 50 yellow footprints that you would stand on at attention. Well, time went on. Suddenly the lights went on inside the barracks. The barracks had double doors. And I've said this so many times, as God is my witness, this thing, T-H-I-N-G, come out of those double doors, and his shoulders rubbed each side. His arms were as big around as my legs. He had tattoos all over him. He had that Smokey Bear hat. His face looked like an Amtrak run over him. I mean, he was the ugliest thing you ever seen in your life. And he walked up to that bus, and I mean, it was dead quiet. Bus driver opened the door up, and he stepped on that first step, and the bus went, "Arr." I kid you not, it did. He was the only drill instructor we had at that time, and his sole job was to receive. He wasn't one of the ones that we inherited once in there. But we went inside this room, and we took all of our civilian clothes off, put them in a ditty bag, filled out a label for address, and those clothes went home. So here we were in shorts, and we were going to be issued our clothes real soon. And the first thing we did is we went through a line, we got our fatigues. They're green, they didn't have camouflage. We got our hat, which was starched. The clothes fatigues we wore were starched. We got 3 pairs of boots. We got about 10 pairs of socks, underwear. We got a bucket, and in the bucket was our toothbrush, our shave cream, our razor, and some other paraphernalia for hygiene. We got our bucket, and then we went and put our uniforms on. Then it was time to get a haircut. So Clyde was still, we were kind of buddies at that time. And I said, okay, Clyde, here we go. And I got up in the chair, and the barber said, how would you like your haircut? I said, do what you have to do. He just cut it. And I mean to tell you, not only did he cut my every living hair off my top of my head, but I think he took a layer of skin with it. I mean, that's how close they went. I just smiled, and I never saw Clyde again. I found him in my book. His name was Clyde something. I don't remember his last name. So, but the letters did no good. He got his hair cut. Then we went and got our shots. Now, you know, the shots, you walk down an aisle, and they grab you and shoot you with a gun. And if you moved your arm, you could rip your skin open. But we got about 6 shots in each arm. And then about that time, we put all of our clothes in a sea bag. We had a big sea bag, and put all of our clothes, our boots, our uniforms, everything in there, and reported to our sleeping quarters, our barracks, we called it. The barracks were 2 stories high, and we got the top. The bunks were too high. They were metal with the mattress. And we learned how to make our beds with hospital folds. When we got through making it, the way the drill, by this time we had 3 drill instructors on us. Yeah, they had plenty of coverage yelling at all of us. And you had to be able to fold this blanket and sheet on this mattress and drop a quarter, and it would have to bounce. That was how tight it was. So we got that done, and we got our boots on, which were really basic at that time, unpolished. They were just bare leather. And we reported to breakfast. Well, it was about a mile we had to run from the barracks to the mess hall. And again, at that time, I could do it. I mean, I just could. It was just easy. We ran about a mile, and we stood at attention in front of the mess hall. And I met the worst thing that happened to me in Parris Island while I was standing in the mess hall. It wasn't a drill instructor, which ate 10 penny nails for breakfast every morning. It wasn't the fact there was 3 of them. It was what they called a no-see-em. Sand flea, no-see-em. And they would land on your side of your head by the hundreds. And they bit like a hippopotamus. Guys would break into a cold run, scream. They'd slap them and they'd scream and take off running. They had to chase them down. The guy behind you would be trying to blow them off your ears. That was a little bit of a help. But while we're waiting to get inside that mess hall, we were chewed alive. And don't get caught slapping one, because that's their Parris Island. They raise those things in Parris Island. You don't kill their sand fleas. I'm telling you, that was the worst part of Parris Island boot camp, those sand fleas. We graduated, of course there's a lot in between, but normal boot camp's 13 weeks. Because of the Vietnam War, they pushed us through in 8 weeks. We didn't miss anything. They ran us through everything we were supposed to be run through, but just a lot faster. Prior to graduation, we were all called to the end of the squad day. And Sergeant Feshauer, which was the meanest of the bunch, he was the one that was on duty that night. He wasn't in any way aggressive that evening, and he was dead quiet. I could see tears in his eyes. He told us why he had to be as bad as he was. And I looked at him and I said, tears in his eyes? That's not possible. He was the meanest thing that I've ever seen in my life. But as it turned out, he wore pants just like everybody did. And he had been to Vietnam, and he knew what it was going to be like. So graduating, of course, that next day, in front of your parents, being able to call yourself a U.S. Marine was the ultimate. You had 2 sea bags at that time, your civilian clothes, your military clothes. And we were to leave our civilian clothes in a big rack in Okinawa Air Force Base. And it was like, will I get to see that sea bag again? Will I be able to come home and get it? We shipped from Okinawa to Da Nang, Vietnam. We got into Da Nang, Vietnam, and there was a tarmac where the big airplanes would land. They could land. It was like Tampa International Airport. I mean, it was a lot of runway. And it was so hot, I remember. They warned us never to take our hats off. And if you spit on the runway, it would sizzle. That's all. It was 140 degrees on that tarmac. So after about a couple of days in Da Nang, we ventured to the north. At night, you could hear incoming coming into Da Nang. Not a lot, but you can hear rounds that were coming in. They were trying to tear up the air base when they could. That morning, we had got our rifles, our C4, all of our explosive devices, our metal detectors, and that was our job, was to sweep the roads, from Da Nang to Dong Ha and Phu Bai and what have you. So we were, I don't think more than a day out, and we came up to this Volkswagen bus burning on the side of the road. And you could see Mama-san, Papa-san, and 2 or 3 children charred, dead. They had hit a mine in the road. And of course, our lieutenant was green as we were. We were all fresh in country. He went berserk. He called the engineers up to sweep the road from that point on. I was the type of guy that I wanted to carry the C4. I wanted to be in on the action. We had a prober, which basically said, yes, that is a mine or not. The metal detector guy, of course, found it first. Then the prober said, yes, it is. And then I was called up to set a charge on it and blow it. I remember coming up, and there was 2 mountainsides on each side of me. I had a rifleman on each flank, and their job was to watch, because I could have been shot if he saw me disarming that thing. There's a device called a prober, and I still have it today. It's one thing I brought home. A prober sticks a hole inside of a block of C4 so you can insert a blasting cap. Well, this particular charge, I chose to use a 2.5-pound block, 26,000 feet per second it detonates at. And I tried to punch a hole in the end of the C4. Well, my hands were shaking so bad, my left leg was jumping off the ground. I was scared. I knew this was not a good thing. But somehow I got that blasting cap screwed in, cut 3 foot of fuse, hit the igniter, got it lit, and it's like a tremendous weight came off of me when I headed back toward that 6x. Oh my God, I haven't been shot yet. Oh, jeez. So we got back to the 6x, and the OIC says, "How long, Marine?" And I cut 3 foot, that's 3 minutes. Well, we had already burnt 1 minute just getting back. It seemed like 5 minutes had gone by after that. And the OIC said, "Well, obviously that's a dud. Go back and reignite it." Well, my heart just fell out again. And we got up and we started walking back, and boom, 6 foot deep, 6 foot wide. It was a flake TNT charge, pressure. And guess what ignited it? An ever-ready U.S. battery, of all things. So we had no issues up until the time we got to Phu Bai. Phu Bai was about daybreak, and we were in that deuce and a half. And there was another engineering battalion setting up at the gate to sweep where we just came from. Made a lot of sense, right? We just gone over all that territory. But we were sitting there in the truck while they were getting out of the way, and I don't remember who saw it, but somebody yelled, "Shape charge." A shape charge is a charge that's usually in a shape of a funnel, and it's got all kinds of scrap metal in it, powered by usually C3, which is about 22,000 feet per second. And they had a shape charge on this side of the truck and a shape charge on this side of the truck, and the whole deal was to wipe out that sweep team while they were setting up. So one of the Marines saw it, and they took off. It was to be ignited by a string. And they had probably 100 yards of string on each side, And they got out to the point where a VC was there. He had just ran. The ground was warm, and he had so much line out that it was too much slack. It was a copper wire that went inside of a igniter had powder in it. And when you pulled that copper wire out, it sparked, lit the powder train, and the shape charge was it just wiped out everything in sight. So here it was. I wasn't in Dong Ho yet. I had the mine problem, and then that shape charge almost blew us away, and nightfall came. The officer in charge says, "This is where you sleep. There's the trenches over there if we get incoming." We didn't know what incoming was. We didn't know what outcoming was. No, never had been trained in that aspect at all. The SOB, if I can say it, did not tell us on the back side of our tent was a wall of sand. And on the back side of that wall of sand was a 105 artillery battery. That night, they had a fire mission. They fired about 6 to 10 105 rounds all at once right behind our tent. We thought we were being bombed. And we all got up and took off for that foxhole. Well, my buddy was in front of me, but the tent poles were this big around and went all the way up to the top. He ran right into one, knocked him out. The officer in charge came over and he said, "All right, guys, now you know what outgoing is. You don't have to worry about that. Thanks a lot." That was a day in Phu Bai. Every morning we'd get up and we'd sweep a particular road back and forth to clear it for trucks that were coming in to bring supplies. That was our job. After a period of time, we found out that the combat base Khe Sanh was fixing to be under siege. And under siege was 6,000 Army, Navy, Marines on that base. And the word was that there was 22,000 NVA approaching the northeast into Khe Sanh. And they did. We were still in Dong Ha when they hit Khe Sanh. The casualties of Marines was 250 died, but their casualties was much greater. They needed to be dug in. These poor guys had a hole. They had no shelter. They had no bunkers. We were called in to dig them in and inert all those rounds that went off and didn't go off. And as I flew into that LZ, a C-130 transport plane was burning on the side of the runway. And it had many casualties. It was trying to take off and get the heck out of there, but they shot everything that landed and took off. As our chopper came in, rounds were coming through it. We came in fast and hard, hit the deck, and we jumped out and we ran for anywhere we could find to get inside of a hole. And I looked up to my side there, and on the LZ, there was a pile of VC, communist, NVA, 25 foot tall at least, and as big as this room, stacked, all dead. We spent quite a bit of time building these bunkers and getting these guys, including my own bunker, getting these guys dug in. Every night we were shelled to the tune of 500 to 800 rounds per night. Most of them rockets, 105s, mortars, 80 millimeter mortars, 30 millimeter mortars. Hill 881, 861 were about 5 miles to our north, and Marines were on 861. 881 was one I went to. And we took a chopper, 8 to 10 of us, engineers. It was monsoon, it was raining. The hill was made of clay. And when the gunner, machine gunner, told us, we're gonna squat down hard, and you all are gonna jump out and take your K-bars, and when you hit the deck, make sure you dig them in because you'll slide right on down to the bottom where Charlie's waiting for you. Well, he didn't tell us that rounds started coming through the chopper again. Pop, 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 pop. Nobody got hit on this one either. But we jumped out, sunk our K-bars into the clay, and then worked our way over to where we could take our shovels off our backs and start digging in. There was no foxholes on there at all. Just clay and a hill. Clay was so hard to dig. Here we were, big bad Marines, but we couldn't dig a frickin' hole. And we dug them long enough that we can lay down in them and scrap metal would come over the top, and that seemed good enough for me and Gardner, except they filled full of water too. We got a lot of incoming that night on the hill, a lot of sniper fire. No real aggression coming up the hill. We popped parachute flares all night long. You know, they lit the sky by parachute. And so here we were on 881, and we had ordnance that had to be blown. There was, they shelled 881 for about a week before we landed on it, our shells. The VC were dug into that hill. We didn't know it, but they were at the very top of the hill, dug in. We ourselves got our trenches done, and every night we endured that incoming. Well, it wasn't long before they spotted these spider holes up at the top of the hill, and word was that everything that they tried to throw in the holes came back out. So they knew that the VC were in these tunnels. What they did is they took bamboo poles that we cut out of the jungle. They were about 20 foot long, maybe. We tied 6 2.5 pounds of C4 on the end of it. You only needed one 2.5 pound block. We tied 6. wrapped it with det cord. Det cord was like a fuse that detonated. You wrap it, you didn't even need the blasting cap. You just wrap it and run the det cord down the bamboo, and then at the end of the bamboo, you would either set it off by fuse, by blasting cap, or something. Well, our officer decided he was going to electrically detonate it at one time. I, again, got the privilege of twisting the hell box. Hell box, a little box with a handle on top of it. When you twist it, it spun a magneto, and it would ignite a blasting cap. On all sides of the hill, there was 3 holes. We had the holes ready, bamboo poles already, det cord already, and the officer said, "Okay, throw it in." And they all ran up there and threw these bamboo poles way down inside the hole. And then when they got back down to where I was, of course I was told to detonate. And when I did, it was like the whole top of the hill just caved in. It must have gone down 15, 20 feet. So one night, the NVA were trying to retake the hill, North Vietnamese Army. Gardner and I were in our hole. I probably had 20, 40, 50 magazines of 223 on me, just myself. So did he. Well, as these NVA come up through the jungle below, you could see their muzzle flashes popping everywhere, and rounds would be zipping by you. So Gardner and I went through 50 rounds in no time at all. We got down to the point where we were running out of ammunition, and they were still coming. They tried to get us ammo from the top of the hill, but as the ammo boxes slid down the hill, if you couldn't catch them, they just kept right on going. It got to the point where, as I know, I only had maybe a half a clip. Gardner was pretty much the same, and we knew that it wasn't good. How could we survive with no ammunition? So we clipped on our bayonets and knew the end was near. The VC NVA was approaching. Even Khe Sanh, where I was lobbing 105s, 155s. Huey gunships were blasting the bottom of the hill. Camp Carroll, which was just over the hill, supposedly was even firing her 175s to help us out. They were coming up the hill. And all of a sudden, the whole bottom of the hill just lit up. Tremendous explosion. 3 of them. Tremendous. Didn't know where that came from. The next day, in fact, it was 3 days later, our officer in charge says, "Hey, I found out what that was. That actually stopped that column from coming out." It was the Battleship New Jersey. We thought that she had fired 18 miles using their 16-inch guns. She was 50 miles out in the Pacific as it was. But she had a special turret that I found out just weeks ago, that was maybe an 8-inch instead of 16. Fired the same 2,000-pound bomb, but she could fire them every bit of that distance. And that's what they used to reach us. If they didn't have that, we would have been overrun. And we were going to be overrun. We could not hold them off. Thank God for the Battleship New Jersey. Things have settled down quite a bit. Still got a lot of incomings. Snipers would take out a Marine just about once every day. You tried to keep your head down, but you had to move around. When the helicopters came in with our supplies, that's usually when they took the opportunity to take out what they could. One day, our officer in charge noticed that he was missing. He was not hitting anybody. And so he said, don't shoot at him. He still shot, but he missed. And I thought that was so dumb. Take him out. No, he didn't. He said, if he's going to miss, we're not going to take him out. And he was scared. He did not want to die. And that's why he missed. So anyhow, Gardner and I were popping flares, and I took the first watch, and I just sat there and basically pulled leeches off of me all night long. The leeches were just everywhere, all of us, just big black leeches because of the monsoon. They come right out of the ground. Gardner was down inside the hole, water up to here, and his whole face was covered with leeches. And you didn't dare pull them off, because you pulled them off, then they'd leave their mouth parts in your skin, and then you'd get jungle rot, which we did. So anyhow, the leeches were horrible, but I took first watch, and it was cold. It was so miserable. Took my rifle butt, and I said, I hit Gardner on the shoulder. I said, hey, buddy, it's your turn. He said, oh, okay. I heard him sloshing around. I was so miserable that I just laid on the side of that hole. I did not want to get inside of it. Pulled my poncho over my head, straddled my rifle, and it wasn't long before I was asleep. Gardner did not get up. He fell back asleep. And to this day, I wonder what the hell woke him up. What made him get back up? But he did. When he stood up, he realized he had fallen asleep. And a Viet Cong was about half the distance between you and I was. And he was again having to use his knife to come up the hill because it was slippery. He had a rifle slung around his shoulders. He had just nothing but a pair of shorts on. He was just feet from me. Well, I don't blame Gardner, but I wish Gardner would have shot him. But instead, he grabs me and pulls me inside the hole, upside down, 3 foot of water. Screamed, Mike, and pulls me inside the hole. Can you imagine how you would feel? Then he stood up, and the guy had already flipped over on his belly and slid down the hill like a rocket. He was gone. We didn't even fire. But our officer in charge, he came over and he said, what the hell's going on here? And we told him. From that night on, neither one of us would fall asleep. We stayed the whole 8 hours. We stayed up. We never went to sleep. I stayed about 6 months up on that hill. I mean, you can imagine living in a hole with leeches, rats. I was down a couple of weeks. So my officer in charge said, pack your gear, and I'm going to fly you to Da Nang at a specific date. Oh, I can't tell you how I felt. I cannot tell you how I felt. I was going home. And I turned in my rifle, everything but my sea bag. I had nothing but my sea bag. I got to Da Nang, and I don't know how long I stayed there, not long, but I boarded a Continental jet. And we flew to Okinawa, and I got that sea bag that I never thought I'd get. I got to Los Angeles Airport, and I wanted to go home so bad. Delta was the name back then, Delta Airlines. That was the name. I walked up to the Delta counter, and I got a ticket to Tampa, Florida the next morning. The plane left at 8 o'clock in Los Angeles and flew to Tampa. And I called home. I remember Mom going berserk. Dad, I said, Mom, I'm in the States. So when we landed, my dad, my best friend, my brother all met me at the gates. I can't tell you how I felt. I mean, it's like you were just scared to do anything. I mean, look behind you. You know, we were always looking to see if there was something that was going to take us out. Just adjusting to civilian life. It's been 55 years. And I think back at that period of time and I say to myself, did I do that? Did I go through that? Joining the Marine Corps, when I did, was the best thing I ever did. Don't regret it one bit. I was glad to be a Marine. I was glad to serve my country the way I did. And being a Marine, of course, was a very proud thing. I mean, you know, it was rough. It wasn't an easy thing. You could not buy the title U.S. Marine. You have to earn it. To this day, I'm proud to be a Marine as I was. I still am. Once a Marine, always a Marine. I'm proud of what I did. I got a fantastic family. Everything came out perfect.